You know what? I'm just going to admit it. I have absolutely turned my back on some people in my life.
If you want to be successful, you must turn your back on others. I'm Eric Brown, and with me, Mr. Mike Jones.
Hey, man, what's going on, man? That's a strong message, man. And I don't care who you are. I'm going to encourage you to listen to this pod blast with the intent to be influenced, because we got something for you today that is going to allow you to be a better version of yourself and be much more successful than you have been up until now.
Mike, I was always taught that it was negative to turn your back on others.
And you know, I can say that in the experiences in life that I have had through what I've learned from the people in my life as well, I learned that exact same lesson. Not only that it was disrespectful, but that it was absolutely a negative thing to do, to turn your back on others. However, I have come to learn in the experiences that I have had in my life that it is absolutely not only a positive thing, but an absolute necessary thing to turn your back on people if you want to be uberly successful.
And in the context of this conversation, why would turning your back on others make you more successful?
Well, you know, I heard somebody say one time, man, and I really appreciate this. Man, I wish I could remember this dude's name, but I do remember what he said. What he said was that in order to be the conductor of the orchestra, in order to be successful in leading the orchestra, you must turn your back on the audience.
Got it. So in order to really ensure the orchestra is at full force and every note is crisp and clear, you have to turn your back on others.
Absolutely. Man, you got it, bro. So let's talk about that in the context of you. Now, I am going to submit that every person in your life, whether we're talking about your professional life or your personal life, I am going to submit that they all have an opinion. Every last one of their opinions is attached to what their perspective of the world is. That perspective came from everything that they've learned from other human beings. So they absolutely have what we are going to refer to as their truth. They see the world in a very specific way. Now, we have all received these lessons on what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. We have all received these lessons on what is right or wrong, what is positive and negative. So there are these social agreements in the universal human paradigm that says to us, this is the way you are supposed to do things. What I have learned over the course of my life is that it depends on what it is that I am doing. Because here's something that I know for sure. This may be your truth as well. There are some things out there that are socially agreed upon that I did not agree to. I did not absolutely agree to those things. I don't absolutely accept those things on face value. It depends on what my specific outcome is as it relates to where I'm going, what I am committed to, whether or not that social norm or that agreed upon social norm is something that I am going to choose to live by.
You know, Mike, I can actually relate very well because in my professional life, I've been focused on an outcome and very solution focused. However, someone in my environment is focused on pointing out all of the things that are going wrong.
Yes.
And I personally have turned my back on that negativity.
Bravo, baby. Bravo. Tell me more about that. Come on.
Also, too, in my personal life, I have a family member that from time to time I've loaned him money and in certain situations helped him out. However, he keeps coming back asking for money. So, in the context of turning my back, I turned my back on that situation as well. And because of that, I am more successful.
Yeah, and you know, Eric, there are so many things that people that are listening to this podcast could sit down and do a personal audit of everything that is going on in your life. If you choose to be a positive person and there are negative people in your life, maybe your mom or your dad, or could be a sister or brother, someone that you feel obligated based upon social agreements to keep that person in your life, that may be the wrong decision for your outcome to be more positive. There are times where you are going to have to turn your back on people in your life. You are going to have to be independent of their opinions. Because if you are off at a trajectory, getting more successful, being more positive, accomplishing more of what you want, but they don't feel that you are doing it in such a way that is honoring of what you've learned or what you've been taught or what your culture is, you may need to turn your back on those particular people. And what I mean by turn your back is it's okay to listen to their opinions, but I would encourage you to be independent of those opinions and keep pressing forward to whatever the positive outcome is that you have set for yourself. I understand how tough that is when we're talking about mom and dad and sisters and brothers. I understand how tough that is when we're talking about somebody that's been a really good friend for you for many years, that may have been there for you when you were in that negative space with them. But now that you have made a choice to create a better version of yourself, to change your trajectory, to be more positive, to go for the things that you want, to stop making excuses. If that person is not there to support you in the context of this conversation, I'm going to tell you, it's time to turn your back on them, baby.
So, Mike, it's a huge point, and I'm connecting to it. But I know that our listeners out there are wondering, how do they determine when the right moment is based on what they've been taught and what their belief systems and those social norms? When do they know that it's all right to turn their back on that person or that situation?
Always a good question. Always a good question. Always going to be the same answer here on Come to the Edge. You have got to know where you're going, baby. If you know where you're going, then you know the appropriateness of the choices that you are making. If you have set a very specific outcome to be healthier, and in the context of this conversation, you've got a bunch of unhealthy people around you that are doing unhealthy things, then ultimately you are going to have to turn your back on them. That does not mean that you have to eradicate them from your life. That means that you're going to have to change your approach in the amount of time that you spend with these people, with whether or not you are taking their advice, whether or not their judgments of how you are choosing to be in your life are affecting you. There are absolutely going to be naysayers in the context of this conversation because so many people feel obligation to the universal human paradigm of shoulds and should nots. In fact, those are the individuals that are going through their lives shooting all over themselves. And at the same time, they are very unhappy with the things that are going on with them. They are very unsatisfied with the life that they're living. However, they would never have the courage to turn their back on the audience, to become independent of the opinions of others. But when you have the courage to do so, you are going to find that you are going to be more successful at the things that you are focused on moving forward.
So, Mike, one final question that I would have, because as you would be doing this work, those around you wouldn't recognize it as success. What would you say to those people doing this difficult work on how to recognize themselves?
You know what? Every last one of y'all need to be saying thank you to Eric Brown for that question, because that is an absolute perfect question as we bring this pod blast to an end. You have got to understand that if you are waiting for other people to acknowledge the work that you are doing to get better, if you are waiting for people to acknowledge the mindset shift that you are making to become more positive, more focused, and accept more personal responsibility in your life, then you are ultimately going to become disappointed and you are likely going to quit. You have got to know that this work is an inside job, baby. You know that you're doing this work. You have got to take the time to acknowledge yourself. And so many ways that you can do that. Go out and buy yourself something beautiful that you really wanted and absolutely reward yourself for doing this work. Take a moment to give yourself a high five or whatever the case may be. But whatever you do, know in this moment that if you are waiting for somebody to acknowledge you and they don't, and you feel bad about it, not shame on them, shame on you. Because this is an inside job, and you have got to be willing to have the courage to acknowledge the work that you're doing. You are absolutely worth it, and you're doing the work, so absolutely acknowledge yourself for the work that you're doing.
So you heard it here first. If you want to be more successful,
turn your back,
you
baby.
must be willing to turn your back on others.
And when you turn your back on others and you become independent of the opinions of others, you're going to know that you are out on that edge because you're going to get some sweaty palms. Your absolute heart rate is going to increase. You're going to feel more anxious because when you're out on that edge, I'm telling you, that's where the magic starts. And when you get out there, you will know that you are no longer taking up too much room because you're out there on the edge.
Here we go now.